I don't imagine that even every hospice IDT has music therapy involved in it, or every hospital uses music therapy. And you've mentioned a lot of these powerful experiences. Just in your own voice, how do you describe, again, what it is you bring to an IDT?
The tricky part is getting there and getting music therapists in the door. It's particularly challenging to build out music therapy programs sometimes because it is a non-billable service, specifically when it is only a practitioner who is a board certified music therapist. Now, there are ways around that we could get into and talk for hours about how you bill for insurance when you have additional designations like a mental health counselor, when you have additional certifications and credentials and licensures that allow you to bill for insurance. Yes, of course, you're then able to bill for your mental health practice if you're using music therapy techniques within that practice. But if we're thinking of just board certified music therapists, in the state of Massachusetts, we don't have a licensure specifically. We just have a board certification. And therefore, we can't bill through insurance. It is a non-billable service through Medicare and insurance. And so really, unfortunately, something that we do have to consider is the bottom line for organizations, especially organizations who have a break-even model where they are a not-for-profit or they don't necessarily have the same number of resources that other organizations may have. And I think in a very real, true logistical way, that does have to be something we talk about and has to be a consideration that comes up because we can't have the service if we can't pay for the service and pay fair wages to clinicians. I think the other thing too is just advocacy, right? We, as music therapists, we do so much advocacy to really try and make sure that there's really high quality research being done about music therapy techniques in the medical setting and specifically in hospice too. Once again, it's really hard to find the spaces, right? When you have a full caseload of people, you're worried about your client delivery and you're worried about the service delivery to those people and really making sure you're delivering high quality work and maybe not as worried about research in a lot of places. So research is important. Advocacy is important. Spaces like what you're creating here today and that we're talking about, this is incredibly important for forwarding the use of music therapy, especially in end of life, because it does have so many benefits. But sometimes the barrier to entry can be a little unwieldy for an administrator who's trying to increase the quality of services, but I don't actually know how to even start. And my advice always is to just start small.
I just wonder if you have any particular kinds of words that you'd want listeners who don't have music therapy exposure to hear.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. There's so much to say, right? I think one of the things that I always encourage people to think about, and this is something that I say to my students and to the various fellows that we have join us from different universities. And what I like to say is when in the world, like you are exposed to something like that, or you are maybe around a music therapist, and let's say you're observing a music therapist in practice, or you pop your head into a hospital room and you see a music therapist singing a song with somebody, to think deeper about it. Because on the surface, it can really come off as just this fun, here's the music person. Here they are singing here somewhere over the rainbow. And so often it's really not just, it can be just that sometimes because sometimes that's what you need. But to think deeper and to think deeper about the way in which each of us uses music in our lives. Because I think the key to really understanding what makes music therapy effective is actually to understand first the introspection that one can have about their own use of music. We use music in our everyday lives. The majority of people, I'd say, use music in their everyday lives to like unconsciously. You get in the car, you turn on your phone, you hook it up to your Apple Play, or you plug it into your aux jack or you play a YouTube video off of your phone or this or that. But how often do we really sit down and say, "Oh, I really want to listen to this album right now. I'm just being like, I feel like I need to listen to this album right now, or I really want to listen to this song, or I'm using music for studying as a study tool to play in the background. So I really would love for more people to take a look at the way that they use music in their everyday lives and to do it without judgment, but to just really look and say, okay, like I am being intentional about the way that I'm using my music, even though I didn't think I was. Or if you're someone who doesn't listen to music, how can you explore music? How can you explore recorded music? How can you explore making music? You don't need to be a musician to make music. You don't need to identify as a musician. You don't need to play an instrument. I think when people dive into their understanding of their own habits, they then can start to understand that medium holds so much and has the potential to hold so much. And once we understand that music can be a container for experience that can be neurologically or cognitively overwhelming, we can understand that the science of music actually creates space for our brains to make sense of things, right? We think of patterns, we think of rhythm, we think of melodies, we think of predictability. There's a functional use of it. And so my biggest thing is I don't want people to write off the use of music in their everyday lives and then in the lives of other people because it is so beautiful. And then to ask questions like, if this is the first time somebody's hearing about music therapy, amazing. Ask questions. Ask so many questions. Ask why it works. Let's look at the brain. Let's look at neural pathways. Let's look at the visceral response to grief. Let's dive deeper about it. And that could be its own conversation over 10 hours about the brain's response to musical stimuli. But I think to ask questions and to really look at one's own relationship to music.